Hello, and welcome to a traditional episode of the Drywall Podcast. I am your host, once again, Nick Harmon. With us today, we have Deiter Kitzul from Regina, Saskatchewan. Deiter has been in and around drywall since he was a very young lad. Prior to that, he worked in a pool hall and found his calling in construction when at that very same pool hall they were doing some remodeling next door, and he inquired as to if he could help. He did odd jobs since then, and he learned the hawk and trowel within the confines of the crazy stucco industry, but he quickly shifted to drywall because he saw all the drywall people inside nice warm buildings when the temperature in the winter up in Saskatchewan was cooler. But it wasn't until he grew his business exponentially that he began to experience burnout.
Yeah, I was pushing all the tools and running the painting side of things. I think I was just getting burnt out was my biggest thing. I was so burnt out. I was like, I gotta shift gears. I wasn't enjoying it anymore. And that's kind of where it's like, I think this is just a new chapter now. I need to move on. And when I just saw online Venetian plaster and photos of it, it caught my attention, and I kept looking into it more. I kept reading more. Okay. And that's when it started, and it just evolves from there.
We talk a lot about his experience with Venetian plaster, but he was also a drywall artist of the year at Trimtex. Fun fact. We discuss sales in Venetian plaster and how that path led him to a sales position with the Italian company Comey. Deiter is now bringing that brand to North America, and with a little help from his friends at the Drywall Podcast, we'll be helping that effort. I am super jazzed to announce our latest sponsor of the Drywall Podcast, all the way from Australia, Morph Sanding Solutions. Drywallers, listen up. Meet the Morph Sander, designed by an Aussie drywaller who knows the grind firsthand. No, literally, this guy has done just sanding for like the past 10 years or so. Think I'm joking. Check out our episode with the inventor, James Wyhonig, episode 115 on the Drywall Podcast, to hear the whole story. It's good. I don't know if you know this, but in Australia they have tradesmen and women who specialize in just sanding, and James happens to be one of those individuals. Spending all that time sanding in conjunction with a ton of other skills has enabled him to invent a seriously badass new sanding tool. Now he's changing the game worldwide. The Morph Sander features a sprung floating tip that adapts to imperfect boards, tackling the worst hang jobs. That's why it's called Morph. And it works with the job, not against it. Have I piqued your interest? Probably. You can reach out to James directly if you have any questions at morphsandingsolutions.com.au, or check them out at CSR. CSR is now carrying their product. But for now, Deiter Kitzul, all the way from Regina, Saskatchewan, on the 122nd episode of the Drywall Podcast. Let's get into it. I'm well. How are you?
I do Zooms. But I'm good. It's just sometimes my internet here is a little flaky, so hopefully I can
hopefully it hangs
connected.
Yeah, hopefully it holds out. If it doesn't, we'll figure it out, man. It's all good in the hood. We have, and stop me if I'm wrong or if I pronounce this wrong, Deiter Kitzul?
Yes. Yeah, you're right.
That's a great name. Is that German?
Yeah, it's a given name. I've had a few name changes growing up. So
okay.
I was originally a Deiter Koff, which is really German.
Deiter, all I know about you is you did a project a while back that was like plaster, but it was very creative. It was very artistic. You received Drywall Artist of the Year award from Trimtex. I remember. I remember trying to sell you some Fresco Harmony a long time ago.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't get any response from you. It's fine. File it away.
Our paths weren't aligned. Yeah.
No,
You know,
no.
I was so, it, yeah, well, with that, I was knee deep in learning something completely new, right? And building that up. And,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I've gone through so many different transitions and different kind of industries and slowly evolving, you know, so that was the Venetian plaster was technically just supposed to be something on the side for me. I was quitting drywall.
Okay. That's been coming up a lot in Fresco Harmony. People are just like, I'm tired of drywall. I just want to learn something new. And I don't know that for me, I was like, I'm going to do this thing because I was coming up with it. And I was like, this is cool. I'm going to do Fresco
Hmm.
Harmony and I'm not going to do drywall anymore. I'm just going to do this. And I was like stubborn and tenacious. And I didn't care how little money I made. I was like, fuck drywall. So
Yeah,
that's kind of like I was like
yeah.
all in, both 2 feet in, going in that direction. And it wasn't until much later that it started developing into a product. I mean, that's just my story. I feel like a wise way to do it is like you do the drywall, and then you offset your skill set with plaster. Different systems where you can go into houses, even
Mhm.
faux finishing or painting. I don't know why more drywallers don't paint.
Yeah,
It's makes good money. All of that. So
yeah,
you were going into the Venetian plaster realm. This was quite a while ago, and then we'll back up even further. But
yeah.
um, I guess so. You were getting sort of tired of drywall. You were going to seek your fortune doing Venetian plaster. What about the plaster interested you?
The thing is throughout doing drywall, we all know it's so competitive, right? It's a
Yeah.
lot of production. I ended up when I was doing drywall focusing more on the custom builds. It was something I enjoyed that
Okay.
wasn't
Yeah.
repetitive. Doing something a little bit different. And then coming
Yeah.
across that, I first saw that that was something that I think would be a very unique addition to these types of homes that I'm already working in. So it's
Duh.
just
Yeah.
a simple upgrade that people could have,
Totally.
right? You know, and as I started doing it, just to learn, I was just throwing it in for free because I needed somewhere to do it. So,
Right.
you know,
Smart.
I was just a lot of free jobs. I guess just like with so you're just going in like here, I need canvases.
Yeah.
So
Early on.
and
Yeah.
custom
Yeah.
homes are the perfect.
Absolutely.
And when I was doing it, no one really even knew what the heck it was. You know, like it's like you're starting ground zero, trying to educate everybody. And it was getting to the point where I was like, well, I kind of enjoy this more.
Hmm.
But I was, you know, this was years ago. The market was very unstable. We had in our area a lot of guys coming from out of province. You would see guys sleeping in their trucks bidding jobs. You know, so how do you compete with a guy that is charging
Yeah.
so low and living out of his truck,
Yeah.
right? So I was like, we just can't compete with this, right? The builders weren't really caring about that little extra quality you do.
Sure.
So I was like, I'm not gonna break my back anymore for this. So I actually made the decision I was gonna go to firefighting school. And I had already enrolled, enlisted. I was set
Nice.
to go to the following season, and I was going to do Venetian plaster on my off days.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where I was like, you know what? I think I'll just give this a try. I thought I saw something there. So
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? I called the school, I canceled and decided let's just go all in on this,
Okay, so
and that's where it started.
you wanted to go all in on Venetian plaster. What did you do? Which type of plaster interested? Because there's a lot of different types. Which type did you
Yeah.
choose and why did you gravitate towards that style?
I really gravitated to just the real traditional look.
Okay.
Just that standard kind of has that two-tone Venetian look, right? That the old school stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, like I like the old world style textures, but I also really enjoyed the polished, to high sheen. And
Yeah.
that to me, I thought like that's just wild that you can do that with
Yeah.
just a plaster,
Yeah.
but it was very difficult to learn. So
Sure.
it intrigued me as something new and difficult to learn. And that's what I like that challenge to.
How did you
Well, it was
learn?
a lot of the practice at home. I talked to a lot of guys online that were already doing it, got a lot
Okay.
of advice and tips, and and took all those advices and just worked on some walls at home. You can just keep going over and over. Worked on sample boards. It was a
Yep.
big transition to go from how you handle a drywall tool to this. So for me, it was really retraining how my body worked because that
Yeah.
muscle memory always wanted to do something else, hold the trowel differently. That was the biggest problem. Once you do that, then it was more just, okay, how can I play around and create something different? And then from there, it was like, well, what else can you do with plaster? And you see all these other once you dig into it, it's endless. There's so many
Yeah.
different products. And so
Yeah.
that's when I then went to Italy and learned. And it's like at that point, your head's exploding from the amount of knowledge. At first, it seems overwhelming, but then you learn there's a lot of common ways of applying and how the products work. And once you understand how the product works, you can do a lot with it, but you got to keep doing it because I noticed if I stopped doing it for even a couple weeks, my body wanted to revert to how I used to work. It's a whole different body mechanic, how
Okay.
you apply and move on the wall. So I was like, okay, if I'm doing this, I gotta just stick with it and just that's it. I would trowel throughout the night working on samples just constantly. I went through so many boards, so many that just ended up in the garbage.
What did you use for your sample boards? This comes up a lot. We use Masonite, which works
Yeah.
really well. What did you guys use? What did you found worked the best for samples?
First, I just used scrap drywall.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
just cut it 2 foot by 2 foot piece. And then from there, well, then I found that was just, they're pretty brittle.
yeah,
They would kind of break apart at the edge. So then I just started using like MDF and just
yeah.
thin sheets of MDF, quarter inch,
There you go.
get a whole bunch of them cut up
Yeah,
and I could create several layers till that board was so heavy,
yeah,
So yeah, it's just MDF. And then when you made for a client, you would put it on MDF, cut it to a nice size, clean up the corners, and it worked for me.
yeah, yeah. Very cool. Okay, and then backing up a little more, and I did not include that Deiter reached out to me recently because you are a sales rep for Comb, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that properly either, but it's a
For
trowel
me,
company,
yeah,
Comey,
yeah.
out of Italy. We'll get into that too. But prior to that, how did you get into the trade? Are you first generation, second generation?
Well, drywall first. I started working when I was 13, but it wasn't in construction.
Okay.
My I was kind of raised in a pool hall. So my uncle owned a couple businesses. One, he owned a construction company for quite a while, and then he acquired a pool hall because he was an avid pool player, and that was
Nice.
kind of in our family. So
You're
I
pretty
was
good at
13, and
you're good at pool.
yeah, well, I haven't had time lately, but I used to play lots, used to be in a pool league,
Nice.
and I've played a couple tournaments with on a team. But life gets busy and it's hard to make time for those types of things. But when I
Yeah.
was a kid, that's evenings and weekends. I was playing pool after I was done work at the pool hall.
Yeah.
So, being this little kid and I've seen a lot of good players. Like I have a cousin that was a provincial champion, and my uncle, he played nationally at one point and retired pros. And yeah, it's its own industry, but it was cool. So I grew up cleaning, working in the pool hall. I worked in the kitchen and did that for a few years as a teenager, just making extra cash, and
Okay.
it was pretty decent. But after that, I was about 15, and my uncle was doing renovations on the pool hall again with his company, which one of my cousins was the foreman, and I'd watch him work, and that's what really caught me. Just the construction aspect, building things,
Yeah.
seeing how things transformed, and I went to him. I said, I would like to go do that. I'd rather go build. And he said, sure, we'll set you up. A lot of with that was doing and landscaping and cleaning up. But so I was doing that for a few years with him, and then I got offered a job. Who was doing A guy was doing a renovation next door. And I was just about to get picked up for work, and he's like, who are you working for? And I told him, and he actually used to work for my uncle back in the day, and he offered me a job, and I said, sure. I went to school with his sons, so
Okay.
kind of knew of him, and that's where I really got put into it. He did everything, but mainly stucco and drywall. So in the summers, we were out doing stucco, and that's where I got introduced to a trowel. And
Yeah.
and then when it started cooling off, we'd go inside, do full renovations. So it was everything from tile and a lot of drywall and painting. So I was touching everything, every aspect, kind of learning every stage, what had to be done. But it was a lot of trowel work, especially in the summers. And being this little kid, I don't think people realize how hard stucco is. Yeah, it's very heavy labor. And I remember my first time using a hawk, I couldn't keep it on there. I kept dumping. It was just
Yeah.
everything every time kept falling over. We first job, we at the end of the day, like we would scratch coat a house and take that leftover material and go parge a house, what was left over. And he's like, okay, you can start, I'll let you parge it with what we have left over. And I think after about 3 times I dumped all the material on the ground, he just took it from my hands and, put me back to watching again. But that made me want to learn it, because I was like, I don't understand how it looks so easy, but when you
Right.
actually do it, so difficult. So
Yeah.
yeah, I worked hard on that, and it got to a point where, yeah, I was just constantly coating all those walls and hawk and trowel. But that's where I also learned that with the weight of all that and how much repetitive troweling, your arms start to burn out. So was forced to switch hands and learn on the other hand. So
Wow.
I got really good that I switch hands all day long. There's not one more dominant than the other.
That's
So
great.
I thought that was a really good aspect, because I think without that and how hard of work that was, that forced me to learn with my other hand. Because there's times where I've had injuries or sore hands or arms, and it was good that I had my other hand that I can switch and
Cool.
continue
How
on.
did you transition though from stucco to drywall?
It was our winters. We were
Okay.
one of the times that did it was come near end of the season, we would prep a house for spring. We would paper and wire it,
Yeah.
and it beat me up. It was
Yeah.
hard battling the environment, and I would look at these jobs and I'd see these drywallers inside with a furnace running.
Yeah.
They're working in
Hey,
t-shirts.
hey, we gotta have heat in here. We gotta have heat.
Yeah, I was like, why am I out here and they're in there where it's nice and warm? And I'm
Smart.
like, the same
Smart.
skill set pretty much. So after
Well,
that, I was
and
like, okay,
And it's cool in the summer. Like those houses are nice and cool
Yeah,
inside. The
yeah,
roofers are out there burning in the sun.
that's right. It was the best of all worlds because in our climate, we can get 40 degrees Celsius in the summer, minus 40 in the winter. But the drywallers, it's very consistent.
Hmm.
Sometimes the houses can get hot in the summer if they don't have the attic blowing in. But I was like, you can't win it all better than the alternative. So I switched to that. And when I switched to the Hawk and Trowel, I started taping. It was way easier than stucco. That mud,
Yeah,
it's
that
moldable.
transition from stucco to mud, like because I'm always like, some of these drywall companies have like stucco crews, and I'm like, dude, screw the drywall guys. Show those stucco guys how to do Fresco Harmony. I've hired stucco guys, and they pick it up
Yeah.
like nothing. Like they're like, oh, this is easy.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that it's
um,
light work, right?
it's
Like
like,
it's
yeah, oh,
a walk in the
man,
park for what I was used to.
right?
So it was a dream for a while. I enjoyed it, and
Yeah,
I started working for some guys that were, geez, they were taping longer than I was alive, right?
yeah.
And it was the guys I first started working with. It was all hand taping, these. So, and for me, I thought that was cool because you're learning taping. It's like you're learning to walk before you run. I got a good rundown on that, but then I started seeing guys running bazookas and boxes, and I was
Right.
like, that looks so much better. You can do a house and be home by lunch, right?
Yeah.
We were doing these houses. The houses we were working on, though, again, were real custom homes, and they weren't worried about the production. These guys that I was working with, their clients were fine because they're like, the quality's nice, what we were producing. So
Were these dinosaurs that you were working with, were they interested in picking up the tools, or it's like, no, 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 we do it
yeah,
by
no, they were
hand?
just set. They were set in their way. That was it. The guys I worked for, they were. I think they were too picky because they would look for things that you would never see, right? So we would 6-inch our angles, and on sanding and checkout, they would put their 6-inch on there with a light and see if any light came through to make sure it was completely full. All our beads
Nice.
were completely full, so they would put a 14-inch trowel behind you. If any light went through, it's too hollow. Everything had to be flat, right? So
Yeah.
it was, and a lot of that you could have some forgiveness, within a builder there. If it looks good once it's painted, they're happy.
Right.
So I started with that type of mentality, is that's what it had to be, but I had to ease up a bit when I switched to the tools. I was like, this is not as easy as that looks either, right?
Right.
Like,
But the tools too, I think you can do a badass. I mean, you see some of
oh
these
yeah,
guys,
once you got
you
them
can
dialed
do
in, and when
you can
you
do a
when you
good
got
job.
your boxes, flushers, everything set the way it needs to be properly, it's a beautiful job, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
um I would still box my butts and everything, but I still finish with a final skim. I would hand
Okay.
skim them all after. And I was still, you know, hand coating all my beads, everything. It's still a lot of hand taping and, doing 3 ways. So I was still using all that same skill
Yeah.
set for doing some of those things, but I was still focused on the custom home still. So there was still a lot of handwork, when you're doing a lot of niches and
Up high.
archways, and yeah, it's still a ton of handwork, right? So it kind
Yeah.
of was 50-50, but when you had the wide open, rooms, you can just fly through, get those done, and
Yeah.
then start working on all the details after. And that was the part I enjoyed because it was so mind-numbing, just boxing all day long, just another square room.
Okay.
So having places with more detail, I enjoyed that. And I guess that's kind of where I was introduced with.
With trim text. So, what time period would you say that was? So you start out, you're in stucco, you move to drywall, you're working with these salty old drywallers, you sort of transition to the tools a little bit. Do you leave these guys and start your own gig at that point?
Yeah, well, how it worked with those guys, I was still technically piecework, but working with
Okay.
them.
Okay.
So we would they would have several houses. So whether I would be doing a house on my own, but it was under them, they'd pay me piece, or if it was a big house, we each take a floor. It was type like that. And then eventually, when I wanted to do the tools, which they were not for, I was like, well, I'm going to go get more of my own work. And that's where I kind of just started building my own name.
Sure. And at that time, did you call it Deiter Drywall? What was, did you have a
Close.
name?
It was Kitzul Drywall.
Kitzul
Yeah.
Drywall.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
I didn't put much emphasis on the name, really. I found when I first looked into it, there's
Yeah.
so many different types of names out there, but I think once you build your customer base, it don't matter. It all becomes first name basis. You just get called to the next one.
And you weren't interested in somebody coming to help you work. You were fine, like at the start, like I'll go. I can like tape and finish this house.
I did it myself, and with the previous rental works, we were doing boarding, so I had an idea on that. But I would piece out to some boarders
Okay.
to just hang the board for me. Other jobs, I would no I had no problem just using a lift and hanging by myself, depending on the job. So
Okay. Did you get into the specialty corner beads at this time, like the step A bowl, channel beads, like some of that cool stuff that Trimtex has?
no, I was just paper metal
Okay.
when I was still at that point.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. There was a couple of years into it.
Okay.
A friend of mine who was a manager at our supplier gave me a call and he said, "Hey, you want to go for lunch?" Because that was kind of his thing. He would take a lot of the guys for lunch here and there and see how everyone was doing. And then I said, "Sure." And I guess at that lunch, Joe was at the restaurant with us. He was going across every city, and that's where I first met Joe. Was we had a lunch.
Oh, Joe Koenig.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, he was in Regina, passing
Nice.
through.
Joe's been on the podcast twice. We just
Mhm.
had him on like 3 episodes ago. We had a really good episode, talking about all the stuff. But such a great guy. If you don't
Yeah,
know, Joe Koenig is the owner of Trimtex. And yeah, if you get a chance, listen to that episode. It's a couple episodes ago, but we go really into the history with Joe Senior
yeah,
and like his like vinyl
yeah.
siding and
There's
stuff.
quite a
It's very cool.
story to
Yeah, it's
the
cool.
Trimtex. Yeah, yeah, the
Uh,
lawn curbs and yeah. So
yeah,
yeah, it's full of stories. And at that point when I first met him, I wasn't really familiar with vinyl beads. I was just used to what I was used to.
yeah. Who cares? It's corner beads. You
Yeah,
throw it on the corner. Do your thing.
yeah. And then after lunch, he's like, "Hey, come to my van, his rental there," and he opened up the back and there was a bunch of bead in there. And that classic thing where he hands people that pipe and smack the bead, and
Joe was doing that.
you smack all these corners. And yeah, he did the full demos. Like he was
Crazy.
showed everything. And when I saw that, I was like, well, this is great, because why I get called to try to fix all these types of corners. And I was like, well, it just made sense. Why wouldn't anyone use this?
Sure.
It's indestructible. It doesn't rust. It's great.
What year is that?
I would ballpark maybe 2010.
Okay. That's still
Uh,
pretty good though. Joe's like driving around talking to individual drywallers about his product.
yeah.
Like that's a testament to like his passion and due diligence in
Hmm.
sales and the industry. You're in sales now. You
Yeah.
understand, like that's pretty cool when the owner of the company is like driving around and
Yeah.
meeting those individuals and being like, dude, come check this out. Maybe they'll give you a hat, some swag, and
Yeah.
be like, and it's like you're a client for life, man.
Well, and it's the thing is he's meeting these no like I was a nobody, like
We're all nobodies, Dieter.
but thing is there were other guys cranking out tons of houses,
Right.
every month, right? And I'm just this guy working by myself. right? So I wasn't really.
They must have saw something in you though. I mean, you were doing custom houses. I mean,
Yeah, I think they
maybe,
saw that market potential as a way, he's doing these types of homes, right? A lot of private homeowner jobs, right? That's
right.
they were good just putting all these details or these really custom homes, and that was kind of my thing.
You're Deiter. So you are, were you doing social media at the time?
No, I didn't
No.
have any.
Did you get on like Drywall Talk at all?
No,
No.
I
No.
didn't do any of that. Oh, geez, I was not on social media for a long time, really. I
Okay.
never, I didn't even have social media for any of my drywall work. I didn't have social media until I started Venetian plaster. Uh, I was just so busy that, and my drywall, it got pretty stressful because I had at a point, I had boarding crews, taping crews, and painting crews. So we
Okay.
were,
You start
so I
growing.
started,
You start growing.
yeah, I started having guys, some that were pretty skilled. We were still doing a lot of custom homes, but we were also bidding big painting jobs too. That was more production. I was just kind of tapping in on everything a bit,
Yeah.
and I think that was a wrong move.
Okay.
I think
Why?
part of my more isn't always more, right? It's
Right.
more headaches,
Yeah,
right? It's more
more
babysitting.
babysitting.
Yeah, I spent a lot of nights working. You would think that you have more guys that your workload's less. It was more,
Yeah.
right? Because you're not always going to get someone with the same level of detail that you may want. And you're going through late at night doing the
Yeah.
checkouts, this and that. And
Yeah.
it was just too much, I think. And especially when you
Yeah.
have that caseload, there's a lot of overhead. And when I was breaking it down, seeing what I was spending on materials, I had some months where 70,000 in material, and I was looking, well, what am I getting after all that? To me, it just wasn't worth it. For the
Right.
amount that I was floating and amount of wages,
Yeah.
that was a big turning point, and that's kind of when things were changing, where the market was there. There were a lot of people lowballing, and I was like, I'm not going to keep doing this for nothing, right? And
Yeah.
that was kind of the point where I started looking at different options.
Trim the fat. There's a certain point, I've talked to other people on the podcast about this too. It's like it's almost like at the 15 employee mark. Like that's the sweet spot.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
about that's pretty close to where I was.
When
Yeah,
you start having to get managers, because now you're losing all your profit margin to supervisors
hmm
and managers to manage like these
yeah,
crews, and
yeah.
you're not really making any more money. You're just doing more work.
That's it. Yeah, it was not really worth it. I think if you're gonna scale up to make money, you have to really scale. You can there's a point where I find that either you just stay small and lean, maybe with a helper or two, you'll do really well,
Yeah.
or you're looking at these big companies, these big commercial companies, where they're pushing a lot of volume and then they can absorb a lot of those
Yeah.
costs. I think in
Well,
between is
almost commercial. Like you almost have to
yeah,
go
that's what I'm saying.
commercial.
Yeah, commercial. They got to be pushing a lot,
Because we
So
talked with Doug McKenzie. Do you know him?
I know of him. Yeah, I know of
So
him.
he was a drywall. He was a drywall artist of the year, but he has the CEO Academy. Like he teaches
Yeah,
people how to bid properly, and
right.
factor in your like profit margin. Like duh, but we're drywallers, so sometimes we don't bid enough, to cover like
No.
all of the expense.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so at this time, maybe you're scaling down and you're like, maybe thinking to yourself, there's got to be something I can do to offset this profit margin. I'm going to jump into plaster. Like, this seems cool. I got Hawk and
Yeah.
Trowel. Was it about that time?
Yeah, like I was pushing all the tools and running the painting side of things. I think I was just getting burnt out was my
Okay.
biggest thing. I was so burnt out. I was like, I gotta shift gears. I wasn't enjoying it anymore. Um, and that's kind of where it's like, I think this is just a new chapter now. I need to move on. And when I just saw online Venetian plaster and photos of it, that just it caught my attention, and I kept looking into it more. I kept reading more,
Okay.
and that's when it started, and it just evolves from there.
I was like 23. I was very new though. I never like had my own drywall company. I was just
Right.
like we did got to do a plaster project in Colorado, and I was like I hate this. And I was doing art with mud and color. And I was like I could
Yeah.
do this with drywall mud, but we were doing a full wall texture with a pool trowel and mud. And I was like, wait a
Yeah.
second, like I could color this mud and paint and texture at the same time. But
Right.
the idea was still there is that like well, the plaster guys were getting like $12 a square foot. And at that
Yeah.
time, this was probably, oh 04, oh 03. And like
Mhm.
my boss was like showing me the numbers, the hangers. I was learning piece rate and some of the business aspect. Like he was cool. We would talk about it like, whoa, what how does this work? How do they get paid? How does this guy get paid? And I remember it was like a buck 35 or something for high hard, like 5'8", ski in, ski out, custom home, beautiful. Like Crested Butte is a ski town in Colorado, like a resort town. And I remember like thinking to myself, well, they're getting $12 a square foot, and like we're getting a dollar. Like doesn't take a
Yeah.
genius. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm in the wrong trade. Like, duh.
Yeah. Well, that's how I
And
saw it. Guys are getting paid that they're making the same amount of money on one wall as it took to tape a whole
yeah,
house. And I
yeah.
was
I
like,
was like,
well,
well, I was like, I could do like even at $2 a square foot. Like if I'm
yeah.
just doing, this thing. And so that was kind of like that was there implanted in me. And I didn't like the plaster, I remember, but like that whole idea of like, oh, I could go do these walls, it would be much funner. I could make more
Yeah.
money, unbeknownst to me how hard and treacherous this road would be. But like
Yeah.
I'm so glad that I went down this path though, because I love what I do. And you're exactly right. I can go do, I started a fireplace yesterday. So a fireplace, and I told her to do, she's got this like crown ceiling in a new build, a custom
Mhm.
home builder here in Albuquerque. She always says like, I have a $1,600 minimum.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's like, can you do the center of the ceiling? And Fresco Harmony is like really easy. Like it's super
Yeah.
easy. And I was
Yep.
like, yeah, I'll do that ceiling and I won't even charge you like extra for it. And she was like, oh no, you charge me extra for it. And I was like, okay, I'll charge you extra for it. But like $1,600, the base coat took me an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Like that prep, everything done.
Yeah.
Hour and a half, go. I'll go back another hour to second coat and then an hour to seal it. And like
Right.
I would like there's companies that don't make that profit margin on an entire house.
No.
That's the industry that we're in.
Well, it's working smarter, not harder, right? You think, oh,
Right.
I got to crank more houses every week just to
No.
make money. And it's like, no, not really. Like you just got to be smart about it. And
Yeah.
you're not babysitting either. You're working by yourself. You're
Sure.
not working long days.
Right.
Although I did have long days plastering because all of a sudden you get several jobs at the same time, and
Right.
it happens. But
The
it's
problem I always saw with plaster was the price, though. It's more challenging to sell. People do love it. It
yeah.
looks beautiful, but it's like so expensive that it's tricky to sell. It's a different conversation.
There's a specific client for it, right? You got to
Yeah.
know where to take it,
Yeah.
So, and a lot of the key selling point when you're selling like a decorative finish is you got to show them the price comparison to say a stone wall or any other type of
Smart.
finish
Yeah.
where they could be paying $45 a square foot for stone. You just say, well,
Yeah.
we can do this for half
Yeah.
that, right? So that's
Yeah,
where
even
we
at 1600, I'm crushing that stacked stone bid or tile
right.
bid or even marble bid, whatever they're going
That's
to
right.
do that's specialty or adding a little flair to that house. She's paying 1600 bucks getting this Venetian plaster looking finish,
That's right.
and I'm making good money. Everybody's happy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think and selling fireplaces were the easiest. That's
Right.
kind of because
Yeah.
someone's always looking, well, we need something different on the fireplace. No one, not many people just paint them. So
Right.
that where I found, okay, that's where we go. We target fireplaces
Yeah.
and go from there. When you walk into the house, for example, like you see a Colford ceiling or other details, and you say, hey, like,
Yeah.
not many people think of doing something on the ceiling. That's wide open space. Let's put something there.
Right.
So, and they compare the price to the other alternatives, and they like it, especially if that's where I found the polished plaster worked really well because they would compare to the cost of like slabs of stone,
Sure.
and they're paying $100 a square foot, and they
Right.
have to reinforce the substrate and this and that, and so that was where like I did a lot of fireplaces because it was an easy sell for me. Yeah, so that to me was is what worked.
And you enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, because it was different. Every job was different. You're doing something that when you're done, like people notice and appreciate what you're doing. Yeah, and that was the thing. Like you could be a drywaller working on a multi-million-dollar home. No one's really walking through and saying, "Well, look how flat that wall is." Right? No one pays attention to those details as much effort as you put into it.
No, they're like,
But
oh, the painter did a really nice job in here. It's like, fuck the
I
painter.
know. Right. Yeah,
It's
like
like those
especially
walls
on a
didn't get
painted
flat by
ceiling.
themselves, you know. It's a
Yeah,
beautiful
like and
finished wall, like side lit, and it's like, look at the paint
yeah,
on that. It's like,
I know, right? So it's a very unappreciated trade. The
yeah.
drywallers don't get enough that they deserve. I
That's
think
a
some
selling
people kind of
point
realize.
that's a selling point that I use for Fresco. Like, all of a sudden you become important. You're
Yes.
here. You're a drywaller. Nobody gives a shit. You're the carp of the construction
Hmm.
industry. Put color in
Yeah.
your mud, and all of a sudden you're talking to the designer on the job and talking about color. That's a
Yeah.
different conversation. That's a different level too of being when you walk onto the job. That home builder, award-winning home builder here now, is she's talking to me about like, do you think this would look
Hmm.
good? I'm like, hell yeah, it'd look good. Add it on.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
no-brainer. Why wouldn't you? So it's a
Well,
different sort of conversation.
yeah, it's definitely how you get treated as a trade, especially from a general. Like there was a brief period that while I was doing all that piecework, I got a job offer to be a site super for a large drywall company, and I was like, you know what, I'll try it out. I haven't done anything like this, but I knew the whole process, and you just see how in the winter, we had some units that the mud froze on the wall. They didn't care if we
Right.
didn't have heat. Like it
Right.
was like deal with it. Put your own heater in there. And
Yeah.
I look back now and then when you start doing your decorative finishes on the wall, they're like, tell me what you need. I'll make sure you got it, whatever you need. There's a whole different mentality, right? They'll make
Right.
sure
Right.
you got what you need, everything's prepped, things are out of your way.
It's true.
Not every job is like that. Like there are going to be ones that you come in and it's a
Yeah.
headache. Not
Yeah.
every job's perfect, but a lot of the time they will ask you what do you need and what should they have ready, the temperature. I even have when doing plaster, I say I need the temperature to stay within a specific range.
Right.
I don't want it to get too cold or
Yeah.
too hot, right? So
Right.
things could dry too fast and not adhere properly or become
Mm-hmm.
hard to work with. So yeah,
Right.
you get it. It's almost like a red carpet treatment. They
Yeah.
they roll it out for specific trades. So
Yeah. It's true.
I always saw jobs when I was taping like there are people bending backwards for like the cabinet guy or something else, right? Like get out of their way. They're coming in
Yeah.
and like it's just you get bullied around. And
Uh-huh.
when you change your job title to something that's more unique, you get treated differently.
Yeah,
So
it's
and
true.
it could be, yeah, you could be working for the same builder and you get treated
Yeah.
differently.
Let's fast forward a
So
little bit. You're doing plaster. You go to Italy and train. I assume to deepen your Venetian plaster knowledge. I mean, we could probably have an episode on just Venetian plaster.
yeah,
Let's talk about Comey. How did all that come to be? And if you don't know, Deiter is now you are a sales rep. I don't want to get it wrong. You're a sales rep for Comey. Uh, um, and that's how you and I reconnected. You reached out to me. You were talking about the trowels.
yeah. No, we're putting something together. Like what I'm doing now is I'm managing like all of North America
Okay.
uh to help build the brand and the sales. I'm
Well,
focused more.
how did you meet these guys? Let's go
Well, I've
a little
always
earlier.
known of Comey. When I
Okay.
first started doing Venetian plaster, Comey was my first trowel that
Okay,
I started using.
you liked that brand when you were doing plaster.
Yeah, I have a few different brands of Venetian plaster trowels. So
Okay.
when I first started, I was doing using Comey trowels,
Okay.
and then we eventually got into sales of products and tools. And with that, we were doing a different trowel out of Italy, Marmarino tools. You know, they're
Yeah.
good product. And so we were selling those products. That's where we got an agreement with them.
You say we, is that
I
Dieter
had some
or
business partners. Yeah, I had
okay.
business
Okay.
partners on that venture. So
Okay.
we all had our titles, and I was in charge of the trainings, the tech, like the products.
Okay.
And that was part of going to Italy, getting real knowledge with the manufacturer, working with them.
Okay. You were
And
working with Marmarino a little bit then.
well, my products that we were using were Barry Calce out of Italy. So went to their factory,
Okay.
learned about the products, all the different lines of products, how they work,
Okay.
uh, to fully understand when I went there, they were pretty happy with what I could do with my work. It was
I'll
more
bet.
learning the technical aspects of the products, the limitations of products.
So this is curious to me because I was pretty much like pool trowel 14 by 14 inch. And then I
Mhm.
started using a stainless. I'm like, okay, because I didn't like stainless knife because it bends too easy. It goes out of shape. So
Mm,
I like spring steel for drywall. But
okay.
and I use steel, blue steel for my pool trowel for years. But then
Yeah.
with the sealer, like I switched to because of the shank, I switched to
Yeah.
stainless. It comes off the tool easier. I just like the way it operates with Fresco Harmony. Well, then I
Right.
started using thinner gauge. And now, and I'm like, oh, there's a place for that too. But now I'm kind of
Mhm.
into these different, like why these tools are designed certain ways. You've got, a smaller plaster tool. You have tools for, and they're constantly innovating and changing in that space, and that's become sort of interesting to me. So that's why we're talking about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
it really understand and same with the tools, like with some of the products, there's specific tools that are designed to help create better finishes, right? So
okay,
there's when you get into a lot of the Venetian plaster trowels, there's a lot of details to look at, burnishing trowels and the size of trowel can make a difference in how the finish looks
sure,
and how you hold the tool. So there's a lot of different variables, and I
okay,
really wanted to understand all those aspects of developing that skill form and really learn from the source.
okay. So Comey's like you had met people maybe in that arena. They'd seen your work. You are in North America, so they come to you and they're like, "Hey, man, how would you like to work with us?"
Well, no, I was talking to the CEO. We were just emailing back and forth. I had talked to him about um, getting more involved with their tools as I was like, I really like I saw what they were coming out with, how they were developing,
Okay,
and the newer products. They've got some patents, and I
okay,
was like, I became really impressed. Like they've over the years, yeah, they were always good. But they were really pushing it, and I really saw that there wasn't much of a presence.
What would be an
And I just
example? What would be an example of one of these things that Comey was doing that impressed you or helped you to see that they're moving in a different direction than maybe other companies?
well, one like well, when you're dealing with white plasters,
Okay.
stainless will mark and leave black marks.
Okay.
There are other companies that say they have a non-marking trowel, but I've always had problems with them.
Sure.
Comey has the patent on the non-marking trowel, and it
Okay.
works amazing. I've even used it for other products and the material, like you were talking about how material comes off the blade. It's really smooth. I've
Okay.
tried it with micro cement,
Okay.
tested it, and I'm just really impressed. And they have a trowel that's again another patent for the lightest trowel, so it's 50% the weight.
Okay.
Uh, so it's really comfortable. Like you pick it up beside another trowel, and it's like I could work above my head all day with
Okay.
that tool. It was just a huge difference, right?
I use the Marshalltown composite hawk. I really like
Mhm.
those. I think I'm a huge
Yeah,
advocate.
yeah,
They're so cool.
yeah. I looked into that and I thought that looked pretty interesting. 'Cause I've never seen them around here, right? So
I've been using them for
I've never
probably 10 years. I've been using those and like I order them from like the paint store online. You can get them. CSR sells them. There you
it's
go.
always aluminum or magnesium, right? So
Yeah, and with the mud, you'll find that discolors the
yes,
aluminum hawks will like start leaving
yeah.
marks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you'll see like that discoloration, that kind of that metal.
Hmm.
It's just always like oxidizing or something into your mud.
Yeah, whatever it is.
So yeah, so I guess with the Fresco that would make a huge difference, right? It's going to be just putting streaks in your finish.
Yeah, on
So
the lighter colors, yeah, it becomes a deal, man.
mhm,
And it's probably the same in plaster. Lighter colors are a little bit more finicky. You have to be aware that
yeah.
anything you leave in that finish is going to be in the finish, which is new to
Well,
drywall.
yeah,
Drywall guys are like, oh, the painter's going to come in and paint over it, and it's like when you're
that's
leaving the
right.
final finish, there's nobody's coming over it. This is it. This is what it looks like. So,
No, it's just like the painter, right? He's going to make sure he strains his paint. It's nice and clean, right? It's
yeah,
that end
yeah.
result, So yeah, those types of things matter when you're doing those decorative things. It comes down to every detail that you're
Very
working
cool.
with.
So you get a job with Comey, and that's kind of where we are today. And now you're representing North America, and you're kind of going on this a pilgrimage, if you will, to bring Comey to the masses. Hopefully, the Drywall Podcast can help with that. But like more
Yeah,
so,
like
you're an expert in the industry, and I wanted to get your story, which it's a good one. I mean, we both have like we have sort of, we could talk quite a bit. We could probably have an
mhm,
episode on plaster, and plaster finishes and just the
yeah,
dynamics of metal and blades, like which would be cool.
yeah.
So where do you see yourself with Comey? What would you like to see happening with this company? What sort of direction are you going in?
Well, I when I spoke with Simone, the CEO, and we were talking back and forth for quite a while before anything had happened, just kind of just discussing the market, and I was just telling him I think his tools would do really well in the trades here. They have a lot of people just know of them for Venetian plaster, but
Sure.
they have a full line of plastering tool, like traditional plastering, skimming.
Right.
Now they got taping knives, right? There's a huge list that they no one knows about, and I said I
Okay.
think I could help bring it to this market and get it more mainstream.
Of course.
Really compete with what's on the market.
Yeah.
I've used, geez, almost every brand out there. So I have a good understanding on how tools will compare, and a lot of them are
Yeah.
good. I just know that with this company, they're a smaller company. There's a lot of innovation put in and precision to how the
Right.
tools come. So, yeah, they have the ability to produce at the
Okay.
large scale, but
Okay.
the same service as like a small company, like a family business. So,
Okay.
there's a different mindset when working with them and using their tools. You notice a difference in the product you're getting,
Right.
and that's where it's like I think there's a big opportunity for this
Yes.
brand
Well,
for us to work
that's
together.
your sales edge because, a lot of the hand tool market and all of that is dominated by the bigger companies. They can just put out a smattering of tools,
Hmm.
to compete. And it's more
Yeah,
about brand recognition than it is actually about tool quality.
right.
And that's depends on the tool, what some company is making. But this seems interesting. They're not they don't make like boxes or bazookas or anything like that. This is just a
No,
hand tool company.
that's it.
Are they doing pans?
It's in the works.
It's in the works.
Looking
Okay.
great. It hasn't been a priority. It's more just the actual finishing tool.
Okay.
Uh, and a lot of people don't know Comey was first founded making brick trowels.
Okay.
That's what they were originally known for, is not the
All right.
Venetian plaster, but
Okay.
brick masons, as their catalog is massive when it comes to brick masons tools.
Okay.
So, yeah, so we're going to be looking at a lot of different trades. It's the drywallers, the stuccoers, the bricklayers,
Okay. Cool.
even tile trowels. Putty knives, they make a five-way, so the
Okay. All
bolts are
right.
total.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so there's the odd things because when I painted, those were things I used.
Yeah.
You know, and the big thing was Comey. They're really competitive with the pricing. They're not producing the same amount as some of these big companies, but so the
That's
whole
a big
plan.
selling point. I
Yeah,
think this the
yeah,
size and that the focus on quality. That's always going
yeah,
to be a thing, I think. Because I've used a lot of different knives too, and I'm
yeah,
like, there's certain knives I like. This one's too rigid. This one's bending weird. You know.
yeah. Well, and that's the thing. So when I came in, uh, you know, it, not long ago too, Simone had flown to Regina, and we sat down and we were looking at the tools and seeing what changes can be made to even improve what they have. So I've put in suggestions on, what, tradesmen here are looking for, what
Yeah.
we expect and what we look at when we buy a tool, and apply that same type of knowledge and make the adjustments. So that's what we're doing there. The tools that are coming to North America will be different than what's generally produced for the other countries, based on what how we work. So the tools will constantly be developing and refining it. We've been having guys test the tools and say, all right, now what change would you make? And that's
Yeah.
what we're doing. It's just the littlest things. It comes down to the littlest details on where the logo is going and
Yeah.
how that's going on. So
Yeah.
there's so much detail, and there's a lot of new things that are in the works right now. Different things, like really cool ideas that will be coming out that no one else is doing with their trowels. We're talking
Cool.
more design wise.
Nice.
So the tools will get a little flashier
I've
and
seen them.
customized.
They're beautiful. And spoiler alert, yours truly might be trying some of these, and I'm not going to blow smoke up anybody's ass, man. Uh, no, I'm joking.
Yeah,
Uh, I would love to try them, and I'm really picky. about my tools, so I will give you full, like, behind the
Yeah,
scenes. I'll give you a full review of what I think, or what I could, what I would be like, oh, you guys should make a blah blah blah, or whatever.
right.
Yeah,
And that's what I tell people. I said, I don't want to hear the good stuff, right?
yeah,
I want to hear the bad stuff. What can
right,
be made better, right? That's the only way,
totally,
so I look for
totally,
the criticism, right?
yeah,
So give the criticism, make those changes. So, because there's always improvements can be made somewhere. So there's new trowels coming out. Like there's, uh, that's more for like what the stucco guys would use. There's going to be a 12 and 14-inch trowel with a
yeah,
different type of handle, and
nice,
it's nice how the grip's designed. So it's looking at all these little details for the comfort too. So we'll get you a package to try out, and because you even mentioned with the pool trowel, you look at the length of the fork that attaches to the blade,
hmm
depending on the flexibility that you want. So
yeah.
how
I think it's
rigid you
I
want
think
the
the
trowel.
shank, they call it a
Yeah,
shank. The pool trowel design is nice because we're leaving a creamy sort of,
that's right.
heavy base coat because we're covering existing texture or whatever. It's a different system. This
Yeah,
isn't I'm not burnishing. This is
no.
production, and cost effectiveness. So it's like, get the shit on there. I want it to be durable. I want it to be, but it's been weird, like recently, and I'm talking about 4 years, we've really been vetting, and level 5 sent me some tools too, and I gave them feedback, but it was like, craft works really well. I love the Barrow Expert. Like,
Yeah.
there's reasons why I like these specific tools, and my guy Jack, I let him, he's done a lot of Fresco, and I'll be like, why do how do you like this? Why do you like this? It's very curious to me, how these different tools operate with different mediums.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is we're also looking at, depending on the applicator, what thickness of metal they want on the blade.
Right.
So your typical flex blades are 0.3 millimeters, very
Yeah.
thin and flexible. For coating is, I would say, zero point 0.6,
Mm-hmm.
zero point 0.5. Then you can get into like concrete finishers where it's zero point 0.8, quite thick and rigid. So
Right.
there's so many different applications that when you're testing a product, it could be like, well, maybe this trowel with this, like you said, the shank with this thickness of
Mm-hmm.
blade would be ideal. There's so many ways of adjusting a tool to make it
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. Plus, I'm talking to a lot of people in the trades about what tools they're using. I have a lot of people applying Fresco Harmony with a pan and knife. And I'm like, I'm not like a
Hmm.
prima donna. I used to be like, oh no, you got to use a Hawk and Trout. Now I'm like, I don't give a shit. As long as it
Yeah,
looks good, put it on the wall with, your hands if you
yeah.
want. I don't care. But a lot of people are using the advanced with the curved, with the rounded, offset advanced knives. People like those. And
Hmm.
I'm asking, I'm gathering all this information all the time. So it's really cool. It's cool that you reached out. I'm
Yeah.
look forward to working with you guys in some capacity. But lastly, one thing I always ask is a pearl of wisdom that you could bestow on the drywall community or the plaster community, as it were, in North America and globally. If you could put something on a billboard, what would it be?
Uh, well, I guess based on my experiences, what I've encountered a lot is, I think you need to understand what your worth is. When you're bidding a job or selling yourself. Um, Bottom line is, I found a lot of clients are hiring you specifically as well, and you can get jobs based on who you are and what you bring to the table. It's not always the lowest price. And it's
Right.
it's really important to invest in like good products, good tools. All those types of things add up, and how you come to the job site, how are your tools set up, and the experience you leave. So yeah, I just found that don't always sweat on doing the cheapest price possible. I see when people are always constantly underbidding. I think overall it's just ruining the industry. It's
Yeah.
bringing, whether it's the contractors, they all start talking and expecting that, right? When cost of living is going up,
Hmm.
well, so should what you be charging.
It's changing. People in the trade, I feel like, are talking a little more, and we're talking about
Mhm.
this idea of, rising tide lifts all ships. We all have to be aware of price point when we're bidding a job. That's why I like specifically what Doug McKenzie is doing, because he's
Mhm.
illuminating this idea of like we're not charging enough. You have to cover all of these expenses to make your
Right.
nut, and we need to keep having that conversation. Drywallers tend to be very hidden about like what we charge, and it's like no, 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 no.
Yeah.
We need to share that, and we need to like
Yeah.
talk about why we're charging this rate and how to charge more and why we're
Yeah.
charging more. So I agree.
Yeah,
Eh,
that's the thing. A lot of other trades talk. Everybody kind of. There's certain
yeah,
industries where it's that's what the price is, and I found even in the plastering, I the price is the price. This is my price. I talk to other guys, and they're like, "Yeah, this is my price. I don't work for less." So
yeah,
I just feel that the coming from drywall, and that was a big thing that really put a bad taste in my mouth about doing drywall was how everybody was fighting for the lowest price. Well, why
right,
you do better just staying home. So
yeah,
why do that to yourself? I think drywallers should really be focusing on coming together and having similar price points, and then everybody's getting hired based on their merit. What they
right.
bring, and
Well, then
because there's
know your worth, because like this job, it's like, yeah, I have a minimum 1,600. I'm still paying for insurance and all of the bullshit that I have to pay for
yeah,
all the time. I'm driving out to the job several times. And she's
right.
like, "Oh, I talk her into doing this, section of ceiling." And I'm like, "Oh, don't
Yeah,
worry about it. Like, I'll add it." But like, I shouldn't be doing that, man. Like, because she's expecting me to add it, and we
that's
want to
right.
be nice. We want to be, but that is knowing your worth. Like, okay, well, I'm gonna add another $300, but the builder shouldn't be having to tell me that.
Well,
Like,
and that's it. And there's times where you can quote, and I've quoted lots where I know my price is higher, and if they say no, it's too high, then that's it. They're not your client. If
right,
they're not willing to pay your price, they're not your client. And if they're coming at renegotiating with you heavily on, sometimes it's okay to compromise, meet somewhere in the middle, but if you just can't make them happy, you're never going to make them happy.
yeah,
So you got to kind of read some clients. Some clients are just
yeah,
there
yeah,
for the bottom dollar, and it's not
yeah,
going to be the job,
yeah.
especially a bigger job. Sometimes bigger jobs don't always necessarily mean it should be a lower
And you're
price.
you're not going to want to work for that person. Like, go
Right.
like if they're trying to beat you up on the price out of the gate, and they're
Mhm.
promising you lots of more work down the road, you don't want lots of work from that person.
Right.
It's a
I think it's
relationship, man. You know?
yeah, that you need to sell them before the price.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing. They need to understand what you bring to the table, and if you don't get the job, there's another client around the corner. And
Love it.
even to this day, when I do a plaster job, this is the price. The prices have gone up, and just because everything else has gone up, I
Yeah.
can't. It's not a charity really,
Right.
and sometimes people don't want to pay it, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't sweat it.
Yep. Yep. I've lost lots of fresco jobs for sure.
Yeah.
Deiter Kitzul, out of Regina, Saskatchewan, on the Drywall Podcast today. If people want to find out about Comb, I've never heard of this brand in my life. Where do I go to check it out? Comey,
Well,
sorry.
yeah, no, that the social media and all that is going to be completely revamped
Okay.
because Comey has never really had a presence. They've been solely focused on just the manufacturing,
Okay.
and they have close relationships. So there will be a dedicated marketing team coming in to set that up
Beautiful.
shortly. So
Okay.
that'll be up soon. But even just the website, and then you get directed where you need to be. But
Okay, so www.come.com.
.it.
But IT instead of .com or both?
Yeah, they're Italian servers.
Okay, so .it. All right.
Yeah, but
Uh,
soon the social media will be up, and
yeah.
that will be the main contact. It's going to be on. I believe they're going to have it on every platform. So,
Okay. Excellent.
and there'll be a lot of things coming on there.
Well, stay tuned for that. The Drywall Podcast will certainly be following you guys. And Deiter, can we find you on Instagram or Facebook or anywhere?
No, I've been off. I've been radio silent for years now. I've been
Okay.
more
Are you coming
focused on.
back? You coming back?
No, I myself won't be on there.
Okay.
There's no time.
Okay.
I find I focus my attention on the business side of things.
Okay.
And I think that's been really important and helps
Yeah.
with the growth and running things. So
Okay.
yeah, I've been off of social media. I won't be on there.
Okay.
I just
All right.
email, and
No worries.
I'm old school now. So
Yeah, I like it. I mean, we'll be talking though. I'm really looking forward to testing or trying out these tools. I think it's fun. It's a cool conversation. You and I have just sort of started talking. Like I said, this is a good starting point here, especially with the social media coming out for Comey. If they want to get in touch with me, and use any of this footage in their social media marketing campaign, I'm totally fine with it. We've got lots of good stuff here. Or talk with Simone. Like I could do a podcast with Simone as well. Whatever. But I love learning about this stuff.
Simone's got some good stories, especially the background. He's third generation into the company. So, hearing his stories of his dad and his grandfather working in the company, and the story of the company, they've got a pretty unique story. So,
cool.
He's definitely a guy to talk to, and I would definitely connect you with him.
Okay, very cool. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's not quite like a Zoom call. It's a little different, but you did great, man. This was a really cool conversation for me. Hopefully our listeners will like it. We've got a smattering of followers out there, and cool dudes and dudettes. And yeah, man, we'll catch up soon, dude. You have a good rest of your day.
You too.
All right. Talk to you soon, dear.
Thanks. Bye.
Huge shout out to Deiter for being with us on the Drywall Podcast today. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I am looking forward to trying out the Comey trowels for sure with little Fresco Harmony. We will keep you updated on that. The Drywall Podcast can be listened to on your favorite platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts, but we're also available on platforms like Podbean, YouTube, and Google Podcasts as well. If you're curious about being on the Drywall Podcast, or if you have questions for me about the Drywall Podcast, you can reach out at info@frescoharmony.com. Also, I'd like to give a warm Drywall Podcast welcome to Morph Sanding Solutions, all the way from Australia. They are making waves in the drywall industry. The Morph Sander features a sprung floating tip that adapts to imperfect boards for those next drywall jobs that totally suck that you guys are following. They tackle the worst hang jobs, and that's why it's called Morph. It works with the job, not against it. Have I piqued your interest? I'm sure I have. You can reach out to James directly if you have questions at morphsandingsolutions.com.au, or check them out at csrbuildingsupply.com. Thank you so much for joining me on the Drywall Podcast today. It's because of listeners like you that I continue to do this crazy podcast and find awesome new people to interview. Stay tuned next episode as we have the tiniest little taper from the UK joining us on the 123rd episode. I'm very much looking forward to that. But until then, I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. And remember, keep drywalling.